Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. This is episode 236, and I'm your host, Jess Root from cardswire.com. Because of an unfortunate technological issue, we are without Seth Cox. Here's the story. Seth and I recorded the show Tuesday night. It was a great show. I always call it the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. It went a little over an hour as we talked about a number of things leading up to the end of the preseason, including our 53-man roster predictions and projections. However, the software I use to record shows logged a recording, but there wasn't a file. So Seth and I had a really good talk about Cardinals football that no one else will get to listen to. And so for the first time since, I think it was one of the very, very first shows I did in 2013, I'm flying solo. I hope you don't mind. This is episode 236, and no worries, Seth isn't off the show. He will be back next week as we preview the regular season. In today's edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, what we had and what I have for you is to talk about a few things from last week. The Cardinals lost to the Minnesota Vikings 20-9 in their third preseason game. But there are things to like. I'm going to talk about the positives from the game, the negatives from the game. The Cardinals made a pair of free agent signings. They added receiver Michael Crabtree and defensive lineman Clinton McDonald, as well as trading for a guy you might not have heard of, Bruce Hector. I will talk about those signings and those additions, what they mean, and give you my roster projections for the regular season. Well, initial roster projections. We know the Cardinals are going to make some moves. The final 53 that they have on Saturday when they make the first final cuts will not be the same as Sunday or Monday. So I will try to make the most sense of what I think will happen initially. So let's get started. Let's talk about the game from Saturday. And there were many things to be positive about. It was a loss, and they didn't score any points after halftime. But there were some things that stood out to me as the Cardinals played their starters the longest that they had. They played it for about a quarter and a half. I think it came into 5 series. My number one positive takeaway was that of the play of Kyler Murray. And Kyler Murray, after looking good against the LA Chargers, and then looking a little more suspect against the Oakland Raiders, as we know, the Raiders tried to make it a point to pick on him and try to send a message to him. I think it was I wouldn't doubt at all that it was for Hard Knocks to get that on television. But whatever the reason was, he struggled. It wasn't as good. Against the Minnesota Vikings, you saw it all on display. He wasn't perfect, but he looked good. He showed poise. He showed athleticism. He made reads from the pocket before taking off and extending plays. He threw a couple of absolute beautiful throws, and he wasn't helped at all by his teammates on a few things. So in all, he goes 14 for 21 for 137 yards, no touchdowns. He rushes for 9 yards, and there was a lot to like. You had to like the deep throw that he made to Damiere Byrd, just, with effortlessly, he just dropped that ball over the top and into Damiere Byrd's hands, who had beaten Xavier Rhodes. The back shoulder throw to Keyshawn Johnson. He also had a throw to Christian Kirk, a pair that actually should have happened. On the touchdown pass, or on the touchdown throw that didn't end up being a touchdown, that was incomplete to Christian Kirk. On the broadcast, it was Ron Wolfley who said that Kyler was a little bit late. Seth actually found out from within the organization from a scout what actually looked like is Kirk actually cut his route off a little short, should have gone towards the back pylon, and that would have given Kyler enough room to make that throw. He had to adjust. If Kirk runs that route perfectly, it's probably a touchdown. Kirk also basically just dropped a throw that was over his head, but definitely hit him in the hands. So the number one takeaway, obviously, is Kyler Murray kind of bounced back, and so any of those weird concerns that we might have had have been quieted. We can go back to being excited for what he can bring. They game plan just a little bit, and there was a lot to like. The second big takeaway, and positive for me, has to be the fact that they simply scored points. The first team offense had previously gone 5 drives with 0 points, and in they didn't score a touchdown, but in 3 of their 5 drives, they came away with points, which is, first, they're only field goals, and it's not ideal, but it is a good start. And the things that happen, they happen to be some negatives, but they have things that plays, and then when they open up the playbook, it should be better. And so my biggest takeaways there for positives was the fact that they were able to put points on the board. Now, another thing that I was very impressed about was when the Cardinals added Justin Pugh to that lineup, whether it was because they started game planning a little bit or whether it was because they had Justin Pugh back in that lineup, that starting 5 actually looked competent. We're not going to expect the offensive line to be a bunch of all-pros. But when they added the players that they did in the offseason, when they got back DJ Humphries from injury, Justin Pugh from injury, AQ Shipley from his torn ACL, and go out and acquire Marcus Gilbert via trade and sign J.R. Sweezy, what you've added, you have a nice veteran offensive line. They are, as I was describing to someone I was talking to, one of the things that I do for, I kind of described each player as what they are. DJ Humphries is an average tackle with the potential to be above average. You've got Justin Pugh, who is at his best we've seen in the NFL playing left guard. I'd call him pretty average. AQ Shipley is a below average to average center. J.R. Sweezy, he's been around the league a long time. He's tough as all can be. Probably an average guard. And then Marcus Gilbert is a very good tackle. The Cardinals don't need excellent line play. They need capable line play for the Cardinals to be able to do what they want to do offensively. Kyler Murray is athletic enough and good enough that I believe he can overcome average play and perform at a high level. I don't think he can overcome terrible line play. They have to avoid the abomination play that we've seen in years past, which is usually simply the result of being down to your second, third, and fourth string guards and tackles and in bad offensive systems. When the Cardinals were at their highest in success with Carson Palmer, they didn't have a great offensive line. They had a capable offensive line. When it was Kurt Warner taking them to the playoffs, their offensive line wasn't very good. It was fine. We've seen Russell Wilson succeed with an okay to bad offensive line. He gets just enough protection. We've seen other players do it. When you have a great quarterback, you don't need a great offensive line. When you have an average quarterback, you need a great offensive line to make up for that so that they can elevate that quarterback play. I think Kyler is going to be the type of player who can go beyond decent or even average or below average line play to be a good player and to elevate his team. I was very thrilled as well with Zane Gonzalez and the way he kicked the ball. He continues to prove the team right. And as much as I'm an ASU fan, I've been an ASU season ticket holder since 2007. I'm an ASU graduate. I am ASU homer, and I love Zane Gonzalez. But what I've seen from him in the pros is anything but confidence that he's going to be the long-term solution at kicker. And yet the Cardinals brought him in at the end of last year. He kicked well and then really didn't do anything in the way of competition all off-season. They have confidence in him. It's been a question among fans, and Gonzalez has proves the team right. Not only are his kicks been true, they look great. He's kicking the ball extremely well in kickoffs. His field goals look fantastic. He hit 3 more against the Vikings. And that's the sort of thing that we saw him do at Arizona State in his career in college. It's that type of role that he is on right now. Defensively, there was the hiccup. But the fact that that the defense had been gashed in 3 series in the previous 2 games for 199 yards, and were it not for a Jordan Hicks forced fumble at the 2-yard line against the Chargers, they would have given up 3 scoring drives in 3 defensive series. So they allowed the Chargers to get to the 2-yard line. They pick at the turnover. They gave up a field goal. They gave up a touchdown. It didn't look like that defense was going to be able to stop anyone, and now they were going to have to do it without their top quarterbacks, as now the starters are going to be Tremaine Brock and Byron Murphy, bringing in Chris Jones in off the bench. However, yes, there was the one bad play, the 85-yard touchdown run from Dalvin Cook, and that's going to be on our negatives. But overall, that defense was solid. The defense was solid. And they harassed Kirk Cousins, they limited the running game, and they got 3 and outs, and it gave you hope for what the defense can be in the regular season. Those are my positives for the game. Coming up next on Rise Up See Red, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web, we'll talk about the things that I'm a little more concerned about, the negatives from that game. That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. I'm back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I've talked about the positives. Not everything was positive, but there weren't a ton of negatives. I mean, first and foremost, I think the one thing that everyone continues to be talking about is the false start penalties. Brett Hundley was flagged twice more for false start penalties. One for what appeared to be a fake clap, and another one which was he clapped and then lifted his leg. And so people outside the organization, the media, even Brett Hundley himself are left to wondering, what in the world is going on? Is the league just trying to make a point to this Cardinals team with this unproven coach and this unproven offense? Or are they doing something wrong? Cliff Kingsbury, leading up to the game, said they think they're in a good place. They understand what there's got to be. Kingsbury's reaction to the first to one of the false start penalties was incredulous. He wouldn't discuss it more, and he really didn't elaborate anymore. But it seems to be that things have been taken care of. I don't know. I don't want to think that this is going to continue to be an issue throughout the preseason and into the regular season, because I think if the Cardinals are smart, if this is going to be a problem, just make it traditional. Just do what all the other teams are doing. And as it wasn't an issue for Kyler Murray because he didn't clap. Kyler Murray went with the traditional. He was under center, and when he was in the shotgun, he had his hands out in front of him. He used the foot to indicate motion or to sort of give a little bit of deceit. And so it was that. I thought all along that the issue that the quarterbacks were having was not an issue of the clapping itself. It was the fake clap, when Kyler would go to clap and then not clap. And I think that the league did not like that. Now, the second penalty on Brett Hundley was a little more interesting. And just by comments, this is me extrapolating things. I believe that they were being a little sloppy as to their stance. The quarterback, from what I understand, needs to have their hands in the shotgun. They need to have their hands out in front of them. They can clap as many times as they want. They can't fake clap, but as long as they are maintaining that posture of receiving a snap, that's my interpretation. That said, I don't anticipate it being a problem because it sounds like the Cardinals know what's going to be allowed and what's not allowed. I think they'll simply make the change. So take care of that. That should not carry over to the regular season. Things I didn't like. I didn't like how the fact the Cardinals didn't do a dang thing offensively in the second half. Now, granted, these are second and third stringers. These are mostly guys that are not going to make the team. But you still want to see them perform, and you still want to see things, because they're still running the Cliff Kingsbury offense. So you'd like to see it produce things. They haven't been much in turnovers. Although, and the penalties continue to be a problem. That's perhaps one of the things that really stands out to me is that, Seth joked about it during the game. Can the Cardinals go a series without the penalty, or can the offense go a series without a penalty? I tweeted back and I said, no, they can't. And that's been one of the problems with the offense. It hasn't been Kyler Murray, and it hasn't been the running game. it's been the untimely penalties. Against the Chargers, it was Max Williams got hit with a holding penalty that put him in 3rd and long that led to that sack that ended the drive. Likewise, Keyshawn Johnson got flagged for that illegal touch, which would have kept the drive going, but he stepped out of bounds, so it was an incomplete pass that left them in that long position. Keyshawn Johnson in another game had offensive pass interference that negated a big play. And it seems every time they get near the end zone, there's a penalty that's pushed them back. And that's been a problem. And that's got to be fixed. The penalties just can't continue to be an issue. You can't. The holding penalties are killer. And if the Cardinals are going to produce offensively, they've got to do more than just score field goals. They've got to score points. And so there's that. Now, another negative, obviously, is that 85-yard touchdown run. After the concerns have got the run defense the first 2 weeks of the preseason, it continues to be something that you raise your eyebrows at. The Cardinals, as bad as their run defense was a year ago, they tended to be pretty solid. Like, there were many games that they were solid against the run except for 3 or 4, and they would be big plays. There is no excuse for anyone to give up an 85-yard touchdown run, even when it's a player as talented as Dalvin Cook, when you have the starters playing. Rodney Gunter misplayed at the line, but then they get the plays behind him. Vance Joseph said as much. If they get past the defensive line, the guys in the back have got to make plays, and no one did. Will it be a problem in the regular season? If they allow these big plays, yes. If they can limit those big plays to be 9 and 10 yard gains, then they can weather that as long as they're keeping everything near the line of scrimmage. You got to limit the run. And Vance Joseph is not that he. It's an interesting take that he has. He does not think you just have to stop the run, have to stop the run, have to stop the run. He says you've got to limit the run, but where the money is defensively is limiting points, and that's limiting the passing game. So maybe they won't be as great against the run, but as long as they're okay at it and they can limit the pass, and the defensive backs did pretty well. Now, the Vikings didn't have Adam Thielen. Byron Murphy played well against Stephon Diggs, and so I guess that's more of a positive than it is a negative. But you wanted to see them make more plays on the ball. Outside of that, I was pretty pleased with everything. And there wasn't much that I came away from that game as a big negative. I was not thrilled that Joshua Miles did not take another step forward in his play. But he is a young player, and so perhaps that's to be expected. And outside of that, that's really about it. And so coming up next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web, well, I'm going to move on and talk about some of the player acquisitions. We'll start with Michael Crabtree, coming up after the break. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Again, I'm Jess Root from CardsWire.com. Obviously, you're listening to the show. This is episode 236 of the show. And the Cardinals acquired Michael Crabtree, a move that is kind of interesting considering the situation at receiver. He had come in earlier in the month. They had made a contract offer. He didn't like it. They let it go. This time, they cut Kevin White. They upped the offer, and now it's a 1-year, $3.25 million deal for Michael Crabtree that's worth up to $5.5 million with incentives. According to the NFLPA's database, his base salary is going to be $1.175 million, which, if I'm guessing, he probably got $1 million signing bonus, and then probably up to $500,000, which is kind of common for the Cardinals have been doing the per game roster bonus thing for a little while. That might be as well on the list. Now, the Michael Crabtree signing is an interesting one for this number one reason. If a team is supposedly in rebuild mode and you draft 3 wide receivers, why would you go get a pretty expensive, reasonably expensive veteran when you have very little cap space? To me, it's very clear that what the Cardinals intend on doing is not be content with a rebuild. They plan on contending. And when you have a team that plans on contending, if you have young players on your roster, you're happy if they contribute, but you're not going to bank on it, especially rookie receivers where their production is often not great. As it is, the Cardinals are already going to rely on Kyler Murray. They already have Byron Murphy in the starting lineup at cornerback. They already have Zach Allen starting at defensive end on defense. And so their three of their first 4 picks are already in the starting lineup. And so instead of going with Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, and then maybe Damiere Byrd, maybe Keyshawn Johnson, maybe Trent Sherfield, they are going with a more proven commodity in Michael Crabtree, who, if you look at the numbers of the last 2 years, the former top 10 pick, he's never been, you look at his career and you might consider it a disappointment. However, as long as he's played, he's been very productive. Has he been a superstar? He hasn't. Twice he's gone over 1,000 yards. 3 times he's gone over 80 catches. You can pencil in from 50 to 60 catches to 600 to 700 yards. And last season, during the first half of the season with Joe Flacco playing for Baltimore at quarterback, he had 41 receptions and he looked like he was on pace for about a 75 catch year of 800, 900 yards. When the Ravens went to Lamar Jackson and it was an all running game, he only had 13 catches the rest of the season. This offense, it's not like he's super familiar with it. There are concepts that he used in college when he went to Texas Tech, so he knows of Cliff Kingsbury. He was coached by Mike Leach. But with an offense that's supposed to be as pass happy, there are the potential for some numbers. I don't think he's going to put up crazy numbers. He'll probably be near what he's been the last couple of years. But if you want to develop a young quarterback in Kyler Murray, you now have 3 receivers who you should count on as very reliable targets, plus David Johnson, plus Charles Clay. So you've got Fitz, you've got Kirk, you've got Michael Crabtree. Now, he's probably not going to be ready week 1, and that's okay. If you think that this team is trying to compete, look at this. If they were content with rebuilding, they drafted 3 receivers. Now Hakeem Butler is on injured reserve. He's not going to play this year. It would make sense just to, let's see what Trent Sherfield has to offer, Keyshawn Johnson. Let's get Andy Isabella some playing time. But as we saw a year ago, if you have a young quarterback and unproven receivers, it can be disastrous. Larry Fitzgerald was the only reliable guy. They didn't use David Johnson in the passing game much, and it was sad. And they want to produce offensively, and so that's what they've got to do. Michael Crabtree, it's probably a good move for him. It's a good move for the Cardinals. He gets more money. Now, it's got to avoid, and he's been really reliable and durable. As for the potential downside, the fun that there could be had, after all, he is reuniting with the NFC West, which means 2 games against the 49ers and supposed arch nemesis Richard Sherman, and then against the Rams with Aqib Talib. If you are unfamiliar, he has had some sort of a beef with both. Aqib Talib, when he was with the Broncos, and Crabtree with the Raiders, famously, Aqib Talib grabbed his chain and ripped it off his neck. It was a total sign of disrespect. Talib tried to do it again on a second occasion, and fists were almost thrown. A fight almost happened. I didn't know about this story, but apparently I heard it on the radio. This is through TMZ, that the issue with Talib is done and over with. He and Crabtree and his family were out bowling. Talib and his family were out bowling. It happened to be just at the same place they were bowling. And we might expect how awkward it might have been. They hashed it out. Past. It's in the past. It should be no problem. The Sherman thing is interesting because Sherman plays with a chip on his shoulder. The whole outburst on TV with Aaron Andrews about someone talking about him. No one talked to get my name out of your mouth. And Aaron Andrews is like, who's talking about you? Classic, of course. Now, I don't expect that to be an issue. Crabtree is going to be a number 2, number 3 receiver. It's going to be interesting what type of production that means for the young guys behind them, because if he's getting 50 to 60 catches and Fitz is getting 75, 80 catches and Kirk is getting 75, 80 catches and David Johnson's getting 50 to 80 catches, that doesn't leave a lot of production for guys like Trent Sherfield and Keyshawn Johnson, guys that people honestly are quite excited about. But it means Sherfield kind of pushes his way back into that special teams role, and Keyshawn in his specialized role. And, if there's an injury, they can step up. and if maybe they just absolutely outplay Crabtree or someone else, they start taking playing time away from them. That's kind of the beauty of this thing, is that they now have depth at receiver. They now have talent at receiver, proven talent, and it allows those young players to develop as they need to, because guess what? Young receivers don't produce huge numbers almost every single time. It's a slow projection. And usually it's about year 3 when they blow up. Christian Kirk could do that. People are talking about that. Seth that questioned if this was Christian Kirk insurance. Now, he's not. He missed the time. He broke his foot at the end of the year. He made a couple of missed plays against Minnesota. But, and based on the playing time, he's been one who's been coming out in favor of the tight end. I don't know what that means moving forward. However, based on everything that I've heard from within and outside the organization, is that they are extremely excited about the potential for Kirk. Big time playmaker potential. And so I don't think that's the case. I think they just want to add talent around Murray, a reliable guy. And then if there happen to be any injuries, you're not going down to the non-talented guys. And that's about that for Crabtree. Coming up next on the show, on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web, we'll talk about the addition of Clinton McDonald, what that means for the defense moving forward. That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Again, I'm Jess Root from cardswire.com. We've talked about Michael Crabtree. Now let's talk about the addition of Clinton McDonald. The surprise that came with that, the Cardinals add 10-year vet. He's entering his 10th season, Clinton McDonald. He's been largely a rotational player. He's carved out a really nice career after being a 7th-round pick by the Bengals long ago. He enters his 10th season. He's played for the Raiders, played for the Bucks, played for the Seahawks. And I thought it was a smart move in terms of depth. The Cardinals really like him, what he can do productively. But I thought they wanted to pair him with Terrell McClain as getting them 2 veteran defensive linemen off the bench, especially since they've got Zach Allen in the starting lineup, and allowing Michael Dogbe, Miles Brown, Bruce Hector, who is the guy that they traded Rudy Ford. So they made a trade with the Philadelphia Eagles. They trade safety Rudy Ford, a guy they were likely going to cut, special teams guy. They acquire second-year defensive lineman Bruce Hector. Those 3 battle for the final roster spot and kind of see how things play out. But what was a surprise to me, the Cardinals cut McClain. And so either McClain had dipped in his play or they see more potential in McDonald. I thought the McDonald-McClain thing would have been nice. Or, here's what I think even more. I think the production and the progress of their 7th-round pick, Michael Dogbe, has opened their eyes to say he is going to be a contributor this year. And so they bring in McDonald. And now, when I recorded the show with Seth, I was not as certain about what his role was going to be. I probably figured he would come off the bench and get, 30% of the snaps, that sort of thing, as a rotational player. However, the thing that I heard, and it was on the radio, was from Mike Jurecki, who works for the team, does the Cover 2 podcast with Craig Rielu. He said that McDonald might actually start in place of Rodney Gunter, which is an interesting thing. Gunter has been okay, but he was the guilty part in that 85-yard run. So you get something a little more established and a little more disciplined in that starting line. That'll be something to see if McDonald's in the starting lineup or whether it's Gunter. If not, now we're looking at a defensive line where you've got Corey Peters, Rodney Gunter, Zach Allen as the starters. You've got Clinton McDonald off the bench. You got Michael Dogbe, and then some young guys. It's still not very much. There's still hardly any experience, because if you take away Gunter and Peters and McDonald, between Zach Allen, Michael Dogbe, Bruce Hector, Sterling Bailey, Pisoni Tassini, Supeli Anu, and Miles Brown, they have exactly 9 games of NFL experience. Bruce Hector has 8 of those games he played last season. I like the move. I like the veteran addition. I was just surprised at the fact that Terrell McClain was the guy that got the bump as a result. On the front of Bruce Hector, Bruce Hector. I don't know anything about this kid, but it was worth it. It was worth the trade. You're trading a guy you were likely going to cut anyway. You get a guy who might be able to contribute. There's no downside to that. And if you end up cutting him, what's the big deal? If he ends up busting after a week or two or three, you ultimately only gave up a player you weren't going to keep on your roster anyway. So no harm, no foul at all. Coming up next on the Rise of C-Red podcast, I'm going to talk about actually it was a surprise move. What does the Korey Cunningham move mean? Before I get to the my roster projections, I'm going to talk about Korey Cunningham as he was traded on Wednesday to the New England Patriots. That's coming up next on Rise of C-Red. Back on the Rise of C-Red podcast, Korey Cunningham announced via his Instagram account and then deleted it, and it's been confirmed by a couple of sources, a couple of reporters around the NFL. Korey Cunningham traded to the New England Patriots for a 6th round pick. Korey Cunningham, a guy who started 6 games last season, showed a lot of promise and had a foot injury that put him on injured reserve. The Cardinals loved the athleticism that he had and believed. Steve Keim, general manager Steve Keim, even late last year said you could pencil him in as being in the mix for the starting job. They got Marcus Gilbert, so that wasn't any big deal. But Cunningham didn't make much progress. Maybe it was the step back from having recovered from that foot injury. Maybe it was complacency, as Steve Keim said on the radio last week, that maybe some complacency had set in. In any case, many fans, in fact, are questioning why in the world would they trade a young offensive lineman to the Patriots when the offensive lineman has been one of their toughest areas to develop and to find talent. Now, first of all, I believe Korey Cunningham was likely going to get cut anyway. The situation on the bench of the offensive line is they have so little experience, especially at tackle. As of right now, Reese Odiombo has proven that they're not going to go with him. He's going to get cut. Joshua Miles, a 7th-round pick this year, has made strides. I didn't think that they would. I would have a hard time believing they would keep both Joshua Miles and Korey Cunningham as their 2 backup tackles, and with no experience outside of those 2, especially since both have been viewed as kind of developmental project players, and Korey Cunningham kind of developed more quickly, but has stagnated since then. So, think of it this way. Cunningham probably is not making the roster. They traded a 7th-round pick from a year ago for a 6th-round pick. They were going to cut the guy. That's a win-win, right? The only thing that people worry about is, if the Patriots come calling for a guy on the back of your roster, you really start to play mind games. Wait, am I missing something? But maybe it's simply that they have the resources they need. And if you like Joshua Miles more than you like Korey Cunningham, what's the problem? It's this coaching staff's draft pick. He is athletic. He's made progress even in his first training camp in preseason. Why not go with him and get something in return? And it's a win-win for the Patriots too. In fact, if they like him, because they're always so good, the Patriots have such a low priority on the waiver priority. They were never going to get him, so they were going to have to give something up. Why not give up a 6th-round pick? They're not worth much. You could get a Keyshawn Johnson, but you also end up with guys you've never heard of or have never done anything in the league. So to me, this was turning something out, giving yourself something out of nothing. What do I see with the tackle position, the backup tackle position? I think Joshua Miles probably makes the roster. I think they like him well enough to develop. Do I expect them to count on him as to be their backup tackle? No. They have the number 1 priority spot for waiver claims. There will be other veterans out there. Mike Jurecki says they've scouted over 100 tackles. Their backup tackle, it's not going to be Reese Odiombo. It's probably not going to be Joshua Miles. It'll be someone that's not currently on the roster. And Korey Cunningham was just the result of that. So they trade him to the Patriots. They get a 6th-round pick in return. And that gives them now 2 6th-round picks. They had 2 5th-round picks next year. They used 1 in the supplemental draft this year to get Jalen Thompson, but it gives them another day 3 pick, which honestly, as you listened to me on the podcast earlier in the offseason, rather than draft, if you've got multiple day 3 picks, hey, don't use them to draft players. Use them to trade and get veterans who can do something. Because 6th, 7th round picks, they might stick out on your roster for a year anyway, a.k.a. Korey Cunningham, or this year, Caleb Wilson, who I don't think will make the roster, that sort of move. And so that's my thoughts. Those are my thoughts on Korey Cunningham and the trade. I think it was just simply, hey, we're going to cut this guy, so let's get something for him. Should they have given him more time? Well, that depends on what they think of Joshua Miles. Can you afford on your roster to have 2 developmental young tackles? Especially if, you could put one on the practice squad, but they've got to make it to the practice squad. And if Korey Cunningham, who started 6 games last year, he's got an athletic upside, he's probably not going to clear waivers. And so, hey, if you put him on waivers and somebody claims him, you get nothing. Now they have at least a 6th round pick. Coming up next on Rise Up See Red, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web, I'm going to give you my roster projections. My 53-man roster projections, which I honestly going to have to change a little bit because I had Korey Cunningham initially on that roster. So that's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web, and it is time to talk about roster projections. Who are going to be the 53 that are who are on the roster when they make those first cuts? Here is mine. Now, you might have seen mine on Cards Wire from Sunday. Maybe it was Monday. I don't remember. But in any case, it has changed a little bit. But here's how it breaks down for me. It starts out at quarterback, Kyler Murray and Brett Hundley. It's been that way the whole time. Chad Kanoff and Drew Anderson, there's no way they're going to make the roster. And they might not even make the practice squad. I don't know who is in the lead in that. I know that Drew Anderson is a guy they liked coming out. They almost drafted him with the last overall pick. But it could be them on the practice squad. It could be a guy from another team that they claim. It doesn't really matter. Or not claim, but sign for the practice squad. So 2 quarterbacks on the roster. There's nothing wrong with that. I have 4 running backs on the roster. I have David Johnson, Chase Edmonds, TJ Logan, and DJ Foster. DJ Foster is, I think, pretty close to a lock. I think he was my last. Pretty sure he's going to be on the roster. The young rookie, the undrafted rookies, Wes Hills and Dante Strickland, I don't think they make this team. I think that Foster on special teams has flexibility and it makes him a little more valuable. They could go with 3 running backs, maybe. There is that possibility. But David Johnson, number 1, Chase Edmonds, and I think TJ Logan's a lock. He's looked really good when he's gotten the ball in his hands. At receiver, I go with 7, although they might only go with 6. Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, Michael Crabtree, Keyshawn Johnson, Trent Sherfield, and Andy Isabella. Those 6 are guaranteed to be on the roster. The 7th position becomes interesting. And is it Damiere Byrd? You have to wonder, why is he getting so many first-team snaps? You got to think that he's going to be on there. But even still, so few teams go with 7 receivers. It's 85%. I saw this on Twitter Wednesday afternoon. 85% of teams go with 5 or 6 receivers. To go with 7 would be an anomaly. Hakeem Butler's on injured reserve. That saves a roster spot. As of now, I have Damiere Byrd on the roster. I have Damiere Byrd on the roster now, is how that goes for me. He is, however, probably number 49 or 50 that I put on the roster, so he could easily be a cut candidate right now. Tight end. This is where I make a change. Before, I only had 3 tight ends, and Charles Clay, Max Williams. I went with Darrell Daniels over Ricky Seals-Jones, something that some people weren't really, at the initial reaction, didn't like. Here's what I looked at with Darrell Daniels. He's been one of their key special teams player. He's played all those those special team snaps, 22 snaps, almost, I think, over 80% of them. Ricky Seals-Jones hasn't played much. I don't know how much they're going to use tight end, and the more that they show up with 3 tight end sets make me wonder they might need 4 on the roster. And so now I'm going to edit what I did on Tuesday night and make this 4 tight ends: Charles Clay, Max Williams, Darrell Daniels, and Ricky Seals-Jones. However, Ricky Seals-Jones would probably, in my opinion, be the guy they cut, because Darrell Daniels is special teams, Charles Clay, Max Williams. I don't know what to think. And then Caleb Wilson probably goes to the practice squad. And I think if Ricky Seals-Jones lands elsewhere, you can just, if you need the extra tight end, you bring him up during the season from the squad. Now, for me on the offensive line, this is where things change. I was going to go with 9. I'm only going to go with 8 because I anticipate an addition. And so we're going to play with this. That's where I keep the 4th tight end for now. DJ Humphries, Justin Pugh, AQ Shipley, JR Sweezy, Marcus Gilbert. Those are your starters unless AQ Shipley is overtaken by Mason Cole. I give a small percentage that Cole wins the job over Shipley and Shipley is cut. It would seem crazy because of his veteran leadership. However, they could save a little money. And with Mason Cole, he played well when he got first team snaps on Saturday, and they've got Lamont Gilliard. They're one of their 5th round picks, and so 6th round picks, and so Gilliard would make a nice backup as well. He can play guard, he can play center. Mason Cole can play guard, can play center. As of right now, I project Shipley will win that job. Mason Cole is the number 1 guy off the bench who can play guard and center. He could play tackle in a pinch, but he wouldn't be very good at it. Even he says the position's probably outgrown him. He played left tackle in college. That's different. Lamont Gilliard is the next guy that I may have making the roster. I don't have Max Garcia on the roster because I think he stays on PUP and will be out for the first 6 weeks of the year. So that saves a roster spot. And I do have Joshua Miles on the roster as well. I go with only 8 offensive linemen, anticipating on signing a guy afterwards. So I think they end up with 9 linemen with Korey Cunningham off. I just added Ricky Seals-Jones. Jeremy Vunovich could be a guy to watch out for as well if they go with 10 offensive linemen, which might change things. On the defensive side of the ball, here's how I have things going. You know who my 5 guys are. Rodney Gunter, Corey Peters, Zach Allen, Clinton McDonald. I think Michael Dogby is a lock. And now Bruce Hector, Miles Brown, Sterling Bailey are the 3 battling for that final spot. As of today, I would think they would go with Hector simply because they just traded for him, meaning they want to give him a look. Miles Brown is a guy who could probably be on the practice squad, but he is a guy who could sneak on the roster. At outside linebacker, I have 4: Chandler Jones, Terrell Suggs, Brooks Reed, and Pete Robertson. Andre Branch's release made that easy. That's a position they might bring someone in. Pete Robertson I like. He might not stay. We'll see. At inside linebacker, I have them keeping 5. Jordan Hicks, Hassan Reddick, Joe Walker, Dennis Gardeck, and Zeke Turner. Problem is, I think Zeke Turner ends up he's a bubble guy. As great as he was on special teams, he, at least as a linebacker, does not fit the Vance Joseph profile. Dennis Gardeck has kind of fallen down the defensive depth chart, but he's a guy that Vance Joseph has raved about, his potential. He's good on special teams. Joe Walker had moved ahead of Gardeck, and he's savvy. I had forgotten about this. He, previously with the Cardinals, was on the Eagles, so he had played with Jordan Hicks before. Cliff Kingsbury said that the two of them had a little juice. That makes sense now. They've played together. They were teammates in Philadelphia with Cardinals linebackers coach Billy Davis when he was coaching there in Philly. And so Walker, I think, is the guy that starts the season and week 1 in place of Reddick, who is getting close, probably not going to play week 1, maybe not week 2. Dennis Gardeck is the guy behind them, and Zeke Turner is there for now. I think he sticks around for a little while, but watch out if they add a linebacker in on waivers or after cuts. This is the interesting thing at cornerback, because with Robert Alford, I assume he's going to go to injured reserve, but he's got to be on that roster initially. So he's going to hold a roster spot for a couple of days. I have Robert Alford, Byron Murphy, Tremaine Brock, Chris Jones, and Nate Brooks. Don't think much into Nate Brooks. He was my 53rd player. He will not end up being on the roster probably. Robert Alford will get moved to injured reserve, which frees up a spot. And whether they bring in a cornerback or whether they bring in someone else. Nate Brooks probably does not stick on the roster. Keep an eye out for Brandon Williams. He's kind of like a cockroach in that sense. You can't kill him. Even though you wish he weren't there, he's super athletic. They like what he did on special teams. Even if fans don't like what he has done on special teams, there's still some upside there. And at safety, I have them keeping 5. The Josh Shaw move to injured reserve was interesting because I thought he was a lock for that roster. And right now they don't have any depth at all in terms of experience. They've got their starters, DJ Swearinger and Budda Baker, but now they don't have any experience behind them. They got Deontay Thompson and Jalen Thompson, their 5th-round pick and supplemental pick with a 5th-round pick. Now you need another safety. That might be a guy you pick off the streets, you claim off waivers. Right now I have Jonathan Owens, who has been playing mostly in the slot. But I think Owens' spot is number 52 on the roster. So I think Nate Brooks is number 1 to get cut, and I think Jonathan Owens is number 2 to get cut, and obviously Robert Alford will get moved as well to injured reserve. And the specialists, no surprise here, Andy Lee, Zane Gonzalez, and Aaron Brewer, those are locks. And that's what you have. Those are my roster projections this year as we enter the final preseason game on Thursday. Now, as a reminder, we will be back next week. It will be with Seth, unless we have some other problems technical with the technical issues. But we will be back next week. We will preview the season. We don't care what we'll talk about the final rosters, the practice squad, but we will do our preview for the 2019 season, and football will officially be back. That's the end of this edition of the Rise Up C Red podcast. Listen to us next week. Thanks for listening as always. Go Cardinals, and make sure you enjoy this final preseason game.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up C Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red C, be Red C Red, and of course, Rise Up C Red.